Bahagia Tan Sri Zarinah Anwar, Chairman Board of Directors University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato' Engineer Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato' Dr. Raja Rasyah, the Executive Director of Asia Europe Institute. Yang berbahagia Dato' Azanin Dato' Ahmad, Director of Suasana Cultural Center. Your Excellencies, the Ambassadors and High Commissioner, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the book launch entitled Contesting Malaysia's Integration into the World Economy. To begin the ceremony, we would like to invite distinguished Professor Dato' Dr. Raja Rasyah, the Executive Director of Asia Europe Institute, to deliver his welcome address and remarks of the book. Please welcome.
Ampun tuanku, beribu-ribu ampun, sembah Patik, mohon diampun. Patik dengan penuh hormat dan takzimnya merafak sembah duli yang maha mulia tuanku Sudi Mencemar, duli berangkat ke majlis pelancaran buku Contesting Malaysia Integration into the World Economy pada pagi yang mulia ini. Sesungguhnya keberangkatan duli yang maha mulia tuanku amat bermakna buat Patik sekalian. Mohon izin tuanku agar Patik menyampaikan pembentangan seterusnya dalam bahasa Inggeris. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato' Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor of University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Zarinah Anwar, Chairperson of the Board of Directors University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Dato' Azanin Dato' Ahmad, Director of Suasana Cultural Center and widow of the late Professor Dato' Dr. Syaril Khalid. Yang berusaha Shane Shanin Saharil, daughter of the late Professor Dato' Dr. Syaril Khalid. Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Unlike many other books, I'd like to mention that this book is about celebrating our friend, Professor Dato' Syaril Khalid, who was not only a dear, compassionate person to us, but we think, at least those who are involved in the writing of the book, feel that he was a scholar who deserves, and I think he's up there listening to us. And I see the crowd here, I'm so happy that we are giving him the recognition he deserves. It's named Contesting Malaysia's Integration to the World Economy. The actual title I actually gave, originally when I wrote my proposal, Essays in Honor of Professor Dato' Dr. Syaril Khalid. But of course, book companies have their own objectives, their own views and so on. Their evaluators mentioned that it seems like a book that could only sell, largely sell in South Asia. The market will be small. So they weren't considering it to be a monograph, one of them based on research. But I told them to keep the topic open, because some of them are asking why Syaril Khalid being brought up there on the cover. So I felt that he deserves to be at the highest level, and therefore all the authors who came in here took on the challenge to see that there's some novelty in there, and therefore it's qualified to be there. And that's why his name doesn't appear on the title of the book. It is a preface, it is a forward by His Royal Highness. It is discussed by the individual chapters. The context of the book. This book was born out of the conviction to celebrate the contributions of one of Malaysia's great historians, anthropologist and sociologist, the late Professor Dato' Syaril Khalid. Shireen Shahlil, the only daughter of the late Professor Dato' Syaril Khalid, wrote to ask me to attend his funeral. I could not because I was abroad. I had initially wanted to contribute a chapter to the book. Given the many friends the late Professor Dato Syaril had, I waited to see if someone else would take the lead. That's why it took a while. Following my discussion with His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Shah, it was quite a long way, my introduction to him too, I went ahead to be the anchor to edit the book to honor our friend, the late Professor Dr. Perak Sultan. I chose to locate the book as an AEI contribution as the late Professor Dr. Syaril was its founding director. He started the Asian Institute. The late Dr. Professor Syaril Talib had asked me to visit AEI on my trip from Maastricht to Taipei. I was in Maastricht earlier, where I was going to deliver a keynote speech in 2003. My first meeting with the late Professor and His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Shah took place then, and of course His Royal Highness convinced me that relocating in the AEI arguably the best thing to do. The purpose of the book. This book seeks to celebrate the contribution of the late Professor Dr. Syaril Talib to scholarship in general and history and foreign policy in particular. He was a rare academic who was a bundle of intellectual energy that synergized others in his company. Always bubbling with his charming smile, the late professor never stopped motivating the young on the responsibility of a scholar to seek truth and novelty in furthering their field. He wasted little time with academics with closed minds. I shall not give examples. Even shying away from shallow critics to spend his precious time on worthy discourse. Our opinion about the locational coordinates of the late professor, LANGSUNG. The late professor emerged from the celebrated history department of University Malaya that produced international renowned historians. We have very serious historians here too, produced by that department. Led by world-famous historians such as Wong Gan-Wo. I wish he could be here, but he's not too well now. He wrote the foreword for the book. Anthony Reid and William Roth. The department produced outstanding historians, apart from our friend, the late Professor. Country Professor Koo Kay Kim, Amarjit Kaur, also a professor, Chandran Jesrun, Jayamal Kadi Tambi Wells, Omar Farooq, who was spending some time here when I was here, Ranjit Singh, Lee Po Ping, Lee Kam Heng, and Pandanamit. I'm sure there are others there. Pardon me if I have not mentioned their names because I'm not from that department. But of course, there are several other incisive works on Malaysian history that exist by Arasaratnam, Kurniawan Singh Sandhu, who became himself, especially the 1972 book, Sharon Ahmad, who became the Vice Chancellor of Brunei University, Arifin Omar, Amarjit Kaur and Metcalf, Ranjit Singh. Groomed in the spirit of Mark Locke and Ferdinand Brodo, the late professor sought to recraft history by using cutting-edge methodologies and innovative techniques to generate insight to establish rigor. He called for scholarship to be sterilized from ideology and self-interest. Perhaps they should take a leaf, we all should take a leaf out of that when we view the Russia-Ukraine war. The late Professor Dato Syaril Talib campaigned for historical interrogation to be honest and sensitive to the multi-scholar nature and polarity of social relations. It might invoke the memory of Karl Polanyi, the Great Transformation. While the late professor was damning in his condemnation of the repression the masses faced under colonialism, he also pressed for such accounts to be told truthfully with evidence. The late professor encouraged research on undocumented developments unrelated to colonial intervention that were important to understanding Malaysian history. The Bethel Church by Professor Danny Wong will be an example. The book brings together works that reinterpret context or add new elements to the already voluminous copious of historical knowledge on Malaysia, to quote Professor Wong Gan-Wo. The late professor carried two traits that define E.H. Carr, expectation of a historian. First, he published detailed accounts of power structures, between the royalty and other elites and the commoners. For example, in Terengganu, in the 7th book, in which he mapped the lineage of the royal class in Terengganu and in the late 19th century. Second, he narrated the developments that filled up the gaps left behind by Western scholars in capturing the relations between them, especially the missing local accounts. This is in his 1984 book. The latter was a link with the book The Malay Labourer, published by the prolific, arguably one of the best anthropologists in the country, the late Professor Nazrin Muizzuddin, who among many who mentored me, is also gone, and the works of Professor Mazna Muhammad on the traditional handloom weaving industry in Terengganu, Kelantan, and Pahang. While Western accounts of colonial integration show a deterministic bias towards colonial strategies with little account of local settings and processes, the late professor had the courage and conviction to complement Western accounts of colonial integration to include the struggle of the royalty to resist European encroachment, capturing in the process the spontaneous nature by which local resistance often began on social friction that grew from disagreements between the local rulers and British appointees. To some extent, it reminds me of everyday resistance, people who write about that, including by Professor Ismail. Through extensive evidence accumulated from both local and foreign sources, he was able to trace in a nuanced way the survival strategies of international royalty. You may see it in his 84 book. Like how the political history lenses of the late professor gave him a sound footing in international relations. His notion of tanah air, waterland, referred to Malaysia as characterized by waterfaring Malays of different ethnicities, including the Bugis, Minangkabaus, Javanese, Acehnese, Bataks, and Mandalings, freely sailing from one land to another. Hence, he took a leaf out of history to promote Southeast Asia as a place bound by waters free of boundaries, where different ethnic groups with commonalities interacted over centuries to produce their cultures. Some elements of this may be taken on when we discuss multiculturalism on a world scale. In his inaugural lecture, Tuanku then was here, raising the occasion. He gave his inaugural lecture here, I'll see that at the back. It was an interesting time in 2005. He drew strength from the historical shaping of the Tanah Air cultures, calling for the harnessing of diverse but connected cultures to build social bonds beyond cultivation boundaries. The book itself now, the foreword by His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin, captures succinctly in a short piece the pulse of both theory and arguments of the late professor's works. Can't go here to speak. The introduction by myself, Professor Adira and Professor Jaswan, problematized epistemologically what should go into efforts to reinterpret Malaya and Malaysia's global integration into the world economy. The second chapter, I tried to reinterpret the notion of, which I tried to refute, which is about Malaysia being a laissez-faire economy. While it was laissez-faire in some sense, but if you look at it, there was substantial interventions to make it possible to do the different things, not just what the colonialists did, but how the history of Malaya evolved. The late Zawo Ibrahim presents the anthropology of the Malay peasantry to reflect on colonial and indigenous history. It's a tribute to those who work in the spirit of the weapons of the East. We feel lots of gaps that way. Professor Ulung Dato Shamsul Amri Baharudin explores the literacy component of colonial knowledge and the construction of Malay and Malayness. What ties them together is they all did their PhDs at the same time at Monash University, partner anthropology, supervised by the same supervisor, Michael Smith. So we met there. It's unfortunate Dato Sri Shamsul in New York today, and of course we don't have the late Talib Islam. In chapter 5, Anthony Milner analyzes the pre-modern Malay political systems from Stanford Raffles to Shahril Talib. In chapter 6, Mazda Muhammad, professor in National University of Singapore, who did not come, pays homage to Shahril Talib and his question of divide in Malay society, focusing on the merchants, weavers, and specialists at the middle class of an old Malay world. She was Shahril Talib's PhD student, graduated here under his supervision. In chapter 8, Viswanathan Selvaratnam presents an incisive account of Malaysia's South Indian coolies, legacies of imperialism, colonial capitalism, and racism. I found it really exciting reading it because it gives different accounts, to some extent reminding me of Peter Woodley, the professor from Manchester. Professor Danny Wong then discusses the role of the Basel Church in sustaining the Hakka in Chinese identity in Sabah, followed by Professor Johan Wanamutu, who unfolds the hegemonic instability in the evolving geopolitics of Southeast Asia. The last chapter by Dr. Rahul Mishra, and Peter Brian Wong, his student, discussed the legacy of colonialism with a focus on Malaysia's foreign policy under our first Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman. Now, to recognize, at least I saw it, of course, many of you will see many other things from the contribution of the late professor. I, for one, wish to honor the late Professor Datuk Shahril Talib for both my personal respect and admiration for a single-minded and passionate approach to scholarship. You will stay here for hours, sometimes beyond 12 o'clock. I do also want to put on record that of his books, he was a personal person, deeply committed to his wife, Dr. Nazrin, who's here, and daughter, Shea Shanin Sare, who will be speaking after me. As I noted at the start, this book is about the late Professor Shahril Talib, because we recognize him as a scholar of the highest standing. We didn't include the name in front because it gives impression it's just a fast script where people wrote whatever they wanted. And therefore, we took on his own the thoughts that he lived, that we say something now in the spirit of scholarship. That's why it's not there, otherwise we can easily put it there. In fact, I'm so happy to note that we are all here to celebrate the occasion about such a wonderful, kind, personal, passionate person. Izinkan Pati mengundur diri dengan mendoakan agar kebaikan dan keberkatan dianugerahkan oleh Tuhan kepada Duli Yang Maha Mulia Tuanku, menjunjung kasih.
Thank you, Dato. Now we are pleased to invite Dato Azanin Dato Ahmad and Ms. Shin Shanin Shahril, wife and daughter of the late Professor Dato Dr. Shahril Talib, founding Executive Director of Asia Europe Institute, to deliver a commemorative speech. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum. Menghadap Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Sultan Perak Sultan Sultan Nazrin Muizzuddin Shah, patut merafak sembah dan memohon limpah kekenan Duli Yang Maha Mulia, izinkan patut tuanku untuk meneruskan sembah ucapan patut di dalam bahasa Inggeris, tuanku. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor of University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina Anwar, Chairperson of the Board of Directors, University of Malaya. My dearest mother, Dato Azanin Ahmad, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, Puan Sri, Puan Sri, Dato, Datin, and distinguished guests. I am very deeply honored to be here today at the launch of the book dedicated to my father and his immense contribution to the historical academia. Professor Dato Dr. Shahril Talib was known to many, but to me, he was just Abah. He and my mother, Dr. Azali Ahmad, both supported me in my pursuit of the truth, both in my legal career and as well as my career as a journalist. Without him, without them, I wouldn't be the person I am today. It feels surreal being back here in his old stomping grounds, and this hall that has echoed his voice and words for everyone who had the privilege to hear him speak. In his favorite color, black, of course. He was a titan, perhaps not in size, but in his stature as a historian and a true academic. His long career at University Malaya culminated in his appointment as professor and head of Department of Southeast Asian Studies. He was then appointed as the executive director of the Asia-Europe Institute, and then he headed the special research unit of the AG's chambers. Throughout his life, he authored and co-authored many books and journals. So it is fitting that today we are here to celebrate another book Abah had a hand in bringing to life. Reading the book, I can see how my father's influence has affected and shaped the pursuit of scholarship for its esteemed contributors. I would like to humbly thank and acknowledge His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Shah for the phenomenal foreword that Tuanku wrote in this book. I fondly remember my Abah and him toiling away at AEI for countless days and nights discussing history and economics. Despite those long days, Tuanku, he would still always come home energized and excited about Tuanku's work, an energy that never dimmed. A heartfelt thank you to Professor Dr. Raja Prasya for spearheading the creation of this book. Thank you to the academic heavyweights that came together to fill its pages with their thoughts, words, and knowledge. Finally, a special thanks in remembrance to the late Professor Wan Zawawi Ibrahim, who has joined my father in the chronicles of history. Thanks to all of you, my Abah lives on in the words of your book, while his intellectual legacy continues on in your critical contributions to the construction of history and the search for historical accuracy and the truth. In fact, my father's work continues to inspire so many, not only in Malaysia, but globally. After he passed, I visited Kyoto University, where he was on academic sabbatical for 9 months back in 1989. There, I discovered his books and his published articles in the Journal of Southeast Asian Studies that will continue to be referenced by scholars for generations to come, just like him. He was relentless when it came to research, and this was evidence in how strongly he dedicated the last 2 years of his life in defense of research. Now, some of you may have gotten that reference. For those who don't, that's the name of his blog, which focused on the Pulau Batu Putih case between Malaysia and Singapore over its sovereignty. Now, the publication of this book has shown me that his name, his memory, his legacy, and his words will withstand the test of time. So I can think of no better way to end my speech than to quote my second favorite author, after my Abah, of course, English writer Terry Pratchett. A man is not gone while his name is still spoken. Ampun Tuanku, izinkan Patih mengundur diri dengan mendoakan agar kebaikan dan keberkatan dianugerahkan oleh Allah kepada Duli Yang Maha Mulia Tuanku. Menjunjung kasih Tuanku.
Thank you, Dr. Azalim and Ms. Shin. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, we are now honored to call upon Dr. Vice Chancellor of University Malaya to entreat His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Muizzuddin Shah to deliver the royal address and officially launch the book.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Professor Datuk Syahril Talib was a highly respected and eminent Malaysian historian, a legend of the University of Malaya, deeply respected by his peers and his students alike. His teachings and writings contributed enormously to our understanding of life in colonial Malaya and of the Southeast Asian region more generally. As the founding executive director of the Asia-Europe Institute, Professor Syahril started new postgraduate social science courses, inspired a generation of students, and launched a very successful international student exchange program. More than 2 decades ago, on my return from Harvard, Professor Syahril graciously encouraged me to establish my own research project that became known as the Economic History of Malaya at this institute. He was always ready to share his ideas and wisdom and to offer inspiring guidance to me in my efforts to construct Malaya's national accounts for the early decades of the 20th century, which is documented in my book, Charting the Economy. I also greatly benefited from his research in my second book, Striving for Inclusive Development. Professor Syahril's empathy and his ability to connect with a person on the street profoundly influenced my own thinking and my own writing. Syahril wrote from a radical, and if I say socialist perspective, and in 1984 published his seminal work, After Its Own Image, The Terengganu Experience, 1881 to 1941. The book gives a vivid and unparalleled account of the prevailing class structure of Malay society and its resilience, and describes how the power relations of the ruling elite were gradually influenced by British administrators. A decade or so later, he applied the same intellectual rigor in his second classic, History of Kelantan, 1890 to 1940. Syahril's approach to meeting the challenge of writing a progressive, inclusive, and open-ended history through well-crafted historiography was partly inspired by the multidisciplinary work of the well-known academician Marc Bloch. As a French resistance hero, Bloch fought the total control and manipulation of public discourse. Syahril's historical research, like that of Marc Bloch, focused less on big events and important people and more on the circumstances of a cross-section of society. Histories tend to include what the writer chooses to remember. They often exclude topics and events that the writer feels might cause contemporary and local historical unease. Syahril well understood this and contended that history should be representative of disparate human perspectives from different communities and all walks of life. And it must ensure that the view from below is not neglected, by investigating fully the experiences of those often excluded from the dominant narrative. Crucially, he argued that historians, as well as others interpreting the past, must defend against the manipulation of data and information by those who seek to gain from distorted historical narratives. In a world where perception of truth is often more important to individuals than the truth itself, we see an apparent upsurge in disinformation, as well as the systematic distortion and manipulation of facts, especially on social media. Questioning existing perspectives, as well as robustly using all sources of evidence, is essential, as is querying dominant narratives. The important role of historians, as Shahrial saw it, is to ensure that the truth is told. Understanding history is always important, but it becomes even more important at times of significant change and global shifts, as we are currently experiencing. Just when we thought we had put behind us the worst impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, came Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war has once again seriously disrupted trade and global supply chains, causing setbacks for the world economy. People everywhere are now facing higher commodity prices, especially for energy and food, and this has caused inflation to rise sharply, nearly all non-US dollar currencies to depreciate steeply, and savings and incomes to erode. Human deprivation, suffering, and inequality are rising. Amid the shifting geopolitical order and global tensions, different narratives of these two events, arising from different perspectives, confront us in trying to understand and navigate through them. Populist voices, aided by social media, are helping to fuel uncertainty and insecurity in societies virtually everywhere. I am reminded of Shahrial's metaphor of history being like a ship charting a course through the dangerous waters of ideology and interests. The objective, as he put it, is to arrive at some unified and holistic understanding of our past and present. He thus conceptualized history as something we must actively engage with. We must do this in order to challenge the biases and omissions that could otherwise creep into our understanding of the past and of the present. I am delighted to launch this commemorative, multidisciplinary book contesting Malaysia's integration into the world economy, dedicated to the memory and works of Professor Shahrial. The collection of essays is enriching, challenging, and a thought-provoking interrogation of Malaysian history and social relations before, during, and after the colonial era. It addresses the role of economic factors and the participation of local actors in shaping a wide range of socio-economic and political processes. In all of the chapters, we find accepted versions of truth being questioned. We find carefully considered new evidence being applied to existing orthodoxies or to hitherto unexplored aspects of our past and our present. There is even a questioning and extension of Shahrial's own work on the Malay aristocracy, which he no doubt would have welcomed. I would like to warmly congratulate all the chapter authors and the 3 editors, Professors Raja Rasia, Azira Hashim, and Jatswan Singh Sidhu. The book helps to fulfill the historian's goal of better understanding from where we have come so that we can navigate better the choppy waters of our own times. Professor Shahril's intellectual legacy will continue, and this book is a wonderful tribute to his life and his work. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, and also thank you to the Vice Chancellor. We humbly invite Your Royal Highness for a group photo taking session. Ampun tuanku, disembah. Maklumkan bahawa demikianlah sempurnanya majlis pelancaran buku pada pagi ini. Ampun tuanku, beribu-ribu ampun, sembah batik harap diampun. Mengumumkan keberangkatan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Seri Sultan Perak Darul Ridwan diiringi div-div kehormat berangkat meninggalkan majlis.